they're setting out and training, they have this plan in their heads, and as soon as the plan isn't coming to fruition or they don't score the first goal, they seem to crumble.
So the same old frailties reared their heads at Old Trafford as Ruben Amorim proceeds with the plan. We're taking a deep dive into our head coach and his squad, as well as the incomings and outgoings of a highly publicised January window ahead of an FA Cup fixture under Manchester lights. It is, of course, your Theatre of Red. Hello there, one and all. Following the latest setback for Ruben Amorim's men against what has become an undeniable bogey side for Manchester United, heads are down and preparations underway for a Friday evening FA Cup meeting with Leicester. Sitting alongside the dismay of a weekend defeat is the closure of the January window and the inevitable disappointment that goes hand in hand with what many view as an underwhelming display from ownership. With me today to discuss all is the lead journalist for the ever-popular attacking football publication, and a man who can be found anywhere from Give Me Sport to Extra Time. I am, of course, speaking about Mr. Dylan McBennett. It's great to chat with you today, sir. How's everything on your end?
I'm doing very well today, very well. Delighted to be here and looking forward to talking about what is a crazy Manchester United team and period at this moment in time.
You're not wrong. Sunday's defeat is still rather raw. We have a 2-0 defeat sitting alongside what is now an astonishing fourth straight league game without a goal against Crystal Palace. The result saw United sit in 13th position after the weekend's action, but also raised plenty of conversation regarding a decision to start without a recognised striker. Instead, we saw the fantastic Kobbie Mainoo trialled in a false nine in what was a very youthful attacking line alongside Alejandro Garnacho and Ahmad. Now, undeniably, Dylan, we saw plenty of positives in the opening 15 minutes. And then Palace grabbed a foothold and had a relatively handy day's work. Before we focus on the January window, just how did you dissect yet another disappointment at Old Trafford on Sunday against Crystal Palace?
It was... I've previously discussed this on other podcasts, and I've discussed it. We have, obviously, an attacking football tacticals group chat, let's say. And one of our main talking points within the group chat is the insistence or the continued kind of patterns of Manchester United taking hold of a game 15 minutes in and then dropping off. Taking hold, looking positive, looking very, very, very impressive. Happened under Eric, happened under Ruben. And then just falling off a cliff and looking like a team of 11 players who've never played together. And Amorim keeps talking about the mentality of the team, and I really do think it's a mentality issue. I think they're setting out and training, they have this plan in their heads, and as soon as the plan isn't coming to fruition, or they don't score the first goal, and the other team scored the first goal, and the pressure sets in, Old Trafford turns, as Old Trafford has been turning in recent weeks. You can't really blame them considering the results, but as soon as that kind of happens, as soon as them patterns keep showing in the team, they seem to crumble, and it can go from looking like they won't concede to looking like every single attack is going to be something they concede from. And it's too common of an issue now. It was very similar to the 4-0 against Crystal Palace last season away from home. It was eerily similar, only the fact that we didn't concede 4 goals. We had a disappointing injury with Lisandro Martinez, which has effectively derailed the season more than it was already derailed. But yeah, it was a really, again, a humbling defeat. How did you feel about it yourself?
Very much a sense of Groundhog Day. There's so many parallels that you can see from fixtures. We're sitting in February, and consistency is obviously the biggest issue, but you could go back through any number of managers throughout the years, and consistency has always been the issue. Something that I've been writing about for years, sort of a trait of a Manchester United squad that seems to pass from manager to manager, is you always need a reaction from them. There's never really a sense of generating graft and momentum and a sense of confidence within the side that you can string together 4 or 5, 6, 7, 8 positive results. Generally speaking, you might get 1 or 2 results. Then you suffer a bit of adversity and then you need a reaction. You're touching on something very good, and it's about how the mood is inside an Old Trafford, because this plays such a huge part. And by and large, Old Trafford is one of the most supportive grounds that you're going to go to. I know people can point their finger at Newcastle and Joshua Zirkzee. Obviously, I don't condone that, and the vast majority of people I know don't condone that, but that is the byproduct of frustration. The response that you get in a stadium is obviously nothing near what you get on social media, Dylan. And this is something that we write about and we speak about quite regularly. And it's the toxicity that goes across social channels and then inadvertently reverberates down to the players. I mean, you only have to look at Anthony. Anthony's after leaving the club. He has come in for mega money. Obviously, we know he's come in for far more than what he was actually worth. That inevitably placed so much burden on top of his shoulders. But the amount of pressure and ridicule that was put on top of him, not only by the English media, but by social media. He goes to Betis in La Liga and he gets player of the match in his very first game. You know, it's really and truly, it just emphasizes just how much of a melting pot that Old Trafford is and the cauldron of pressure that comes alongside wearing that jersey in Manchester. I think what we're seeing at the moment with a perseverance for formation that a lot of people are now starting to turn their noses up at, I think it's required. Amorim has come in and he's stated, this is what we're going to do. We're going to persevere with it. We're not going to change. And it might be a case that hierarchy decides they need to change the coach before we change the formation. But he's insisting on remaining with that because he knows he needs to develop and cultivate a solid ethos inside an Old Trafford. And that is the way you need to move forward. I know there is a conversation that could be had, and it is something that I was actually going to ask you. A lot of people are now starting to ask the question as to whether or not he's maybe been a little bit too stubborn in trying to implement a practice amongst a group that are just not capable of being able to adhere to that. But do you see within this squad and the couple of additions that we're going to speak about as well shortly, do you see the capabilities of them being able to adhere to his philosophy?
I think a lot of players need to go for that to happen. There's so many parallels from Amorim's time at Sporting when he took over. I spoke to people in Portugal close to the situation at length before he effectively took over, before he agreed to take over the job when the rumours were sparking and circulating. Amorim took over a Sporting team that had a disconnect from fans, the club, fans, the players. He took over a Sporting team that hadn't won the league in 19 years. And he had a set system coming from Casapia, and he did not veer from that system. They won the league in his second season, I believe. And what they said, what the people I spoke to in Portugal said is, this is Ruben Amorim. You need to give him time to put the structures that he had in place at Sporting into Manchester United. And the bottom line is he needs new players. One thing I really ask him to stop doing, and it's rich coming from myself, who's never managed a football match in my life, but the statistics and visibly on the pitch showcase that playing fullbacks at wing-back isn't working for us. When Dalot and Mazraoui play at wing-back, we lose more games than we don't. When Ahmad and, to be honest, we haven't really had a left wing-back, a winger who could play left wing-back up until Dorgu's signing. Hopefully now that Dorgu is coming into the club, we can put Ahmad at right wing-back and Dorgu at left wing-back. But in regards to the current set of players, I think to play his system in a back three, you need 3 mobile defenders that can cover large amounts of ground, which is why we've been linked with his former player, Ousmane Diamonde, which is why we've been linked to Jared Brantway, which is why we signed Yoro. As much as I love Maguire, and as brilliant as he's been in the past 2 seasons, I don't think his physicality, his pace are going to long-term fit a Ruben Amorim system. I think he needs pace in that back line. He needs defenders who are physically dominant. In the midfield is my biggest query. Cobby probably fits now more as a 10, which is nice, and I'm happy that Cobby has a place in the team as a possible 10, because I had doubts over who was going to play alongside Cobby in the pivot. We've signed Ugarte, and Ugarte and Cobby obviously wasn't working. I think we all could see that. But then what happens? Do we look to offload Ugarte just after signing him, or do we sign a partner for Ugarte? And it looks like it's going to be the latter. It looks like we're going to sign a partner for Ugarte. Who that is, right now, it's up in the air. But in regards to whether this current set of players, I don't think the current 11 players in the Manchester United squad as a whole and as a collective are going to be able to implement the system to a high level that Amorim wants them to. And I don't think individually they're bad players. I think if you individually put a lot of these players into other Premier League teams, they would look well. Like, for instance, if you put a De Ligt in a Liverpool, I think he looks good. I think Liverpool are still top of the league. If you put a Garnacho in City, or if you put Ugarte in that City midfield this season that have struggled so much with physicality and lack of pace, I think Ugarte looks like a different player. Even though he's looked well for us, I think he looks like a different player. I think if you stick a lot of criticism over Andre Onana, but I think, and look, he has a mistake and there's no denying that. I think if you put Onana in a more, in a more settled backline that doesn't concede as many shots and doesn't have the mentality issues that the Manchester United team has, again, I think he looks like a much more, a goalkeeper that can flourish more in the Premier League. But to fully answer your question, I think we need about 7 or 8 players implemented and brought in to play the system to the level that Amorim wants, starting with another right wing back, which, as Laurie Whitwell reported last week, is rumoured to be Quende, who we would have signed in the January window, but for the fact he's not 18 until April, I believe. So that's kind of the short answer is no, I don't think this current 11 players can play the system to a high enough level.
Well, then, in response to that, this is where I try to really elaborate on these situations when I'm speaking with people or when I'm writing about them. Every single player, every coach and manager that comes to this football club, I always try to give them the benefit of the doubt, even when the vast majority of the fan base is turning against them. Look at everything as pragmatically as I possibly can. When Erik ten Hag was in charge, I always tried to see any form of green shoots, for example, and really focus on those as opposed to focusing on the negatives. We're at a point in the season in February where we've lost 11 Premier League fixtures already. He doesn't appear to have any want, will, or desire to shift away from the focus and the philosophy that we're speaking about, that he wants to incorporate what he was doing in Sporting in Manchester. You're saying that the current crop of players, you don't think they're good enough to be able to adhere to this, and we need 7 or 8 players to be able to function with that. So if the man continues to persevere with this formation for the remainder of the season and continues losing games at the rate that he is, we're going to find ourselves in an awful lot of trouble. Ten Hag, when he was there, he brought this Ajax philosophy, which was this all-out attack, and maybe 85% of the players sitting in the opposition's final third. He got a taste of Premier League football and he changed his entire ethos after 2 games just to be able to facilitate maintaining some form of suitable results. I'm aware now we have obviously a different hierarchy in charge, but even though they were fully aware of what they were doing in bringing this manager in January, giving him a squad of players that was not his own, and knowing that he was going to implement a philosophy that was his and totally alien to what this squad was used to, are they going to continue patting him on the back and understanding what he's going through as a necessary transition if he ends up losing anywhere above 20 games this season?
I think this is where their biggest issue comes. And when I say that, I mean Ineos. The decision, when they made the decision to keep Eric in the summer, and as you say, I've always supported Ten Hag. I've always supported a lot of players that have come into this club, because it is a graveyard, and Gary Neville has spoken about it so much. It's a graveyard for players. It's a graveyard for a player like Anthony, who was extremely highly rated before he came into Manchester United. And as you said, he got a man of the match for Real Betis the other week, and he looked about. Anthony was never overweight or anything. He looked about 5 pounds lighter when he was running with the ball. He looked exuberant. He looked confident. And then that's why I made the point for Eric in the summer, and that's why Ineos' biggest mistake was sacking him when they did. Because if you're going to keep a manager in the summer and then sack him and bring in a back 3 manager, this was always inevitable. This team has been built for a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-2-4, as Ten Hag played, for the last 5, 6, 7 years. Ollie played a 4-2-3-1. I think Ranić still played the 4-2-3-1 when Ranić took over, and then Ten Hag was playing the 4-2-3-1 or a 4-2-4 kind of when he came in. And then to make the decision to keep Eric, to sign Xerxes, Ugarte and these type of players to again adhere to Ten Hag's system, and then to sack Ten Hag and bring in a back 3 manager. You have to effectively eat the humble pie. You have to take these defeats. If this is the decision and I don't mean us as fans, I mean Ineos have to take these defeats. This is effectively their making. They decided to go with a back 3 manager during the season, as we've heard about Ashford wanted back four managers. Ashford wanted managers who were Premier League proven, who would fit the players into a system, not their system. They obviously had an idea of how they wanted to play, but it didn't have to be a particular back three, or it didn't have to be a particular back four. That's a Thomas Frank. That's a Graham Potter was linked with us. Obviously, Southgate was linked with us, and whether that was a boogeyman kind of thing. De Zerbi was linked with us as well. These type of managers who could kind of fit players around the system instead of just coming in and playing one set way. And now that they've brought Amorim in and he plays a back three and the squad clearly isn't capable of playing that to a high level, they have to keep patting them on the back. This is their decision. This is what they wanted. And again, if let's say the decision comes and they turn around and don't pat them on the back, it would be yet another example of an exuberant, highly rated manager coming into a football club and leaving bottom of the barrel. You know what I mean? Like, Liverpool wanted Amorim, City were interested in Amorim, and I'll tell you why 100%. It's a fact that City were interested in Amorim, because Hugo Viana and Amorim are hand in hand. They've always been hand in hand. Hugo Viana went to City, and my absolute kind of 100% gut feeling was they were going for Amorim before we hopped in, and Amorim was going to take over from Pep when the time came. Absolutely. And now you look at what way Amorim is going to leave this football club. His reputation is going to be in the gutter, all because of, again, ineptitude. I'm going to give Ineos as much time as they need, because I understand the ineptitude comes from before, and they're picking up the scraps and the miss kind of comings and the shortcomings of the Glazers. So these type of mistakes were going to happen. The Ashford mistake was surprising. The Amorim mistake, I don't think it's a mistake. I think he's going to be a very successful manager with us, but the mistake is bringing him in mid-season and ask him to implement this system that it was never. I had the good feeling when it happened. It was never going to go as well as everyone thought when he beat Pep Guardiola 4-0 with Sporting Lisbon. You know, it was never going to go as well as people thought. I still believe he's probably the best manager we could have got to bring us forward and win a league title. But, and I'll put this question to you as well, which does worry me and does scare me. Can you tell me of a sustained period in the Premier League where a back three has dominated? Because I've been thinking about it, and Conte is the only man that comes to mind for me that has won a Premier League and dominated. Outside of that, I can't think of a period in the Premier League where a back three has dominated, which does worry me as well.
Off the top of my head now, you're looking at Conte, you're looking at Thomas Tuchel. Thomas Tuchel had a little bit of a period where he implemented a back three as well, but by and large, it's always been viewed as a kind of a continental system, not one that was largely implemented in the Premier League. I wouldn't be more so worried about the actual structure of the formation. I know a lot of people can point their finger and say, well, this is what happens to that formation in England. You're dealing with high tempo. You're dealing with an entirely different style of football than you have in the continent. And this frivolous form of three at the back, when you're allowing your overloading fullbacks to really, really maraud and affect the final third, is inevitably going to be caught out. I stand in the same side of the ship that you do. First and foremost, I back Amorim. I always have backed him, just like I backed Ten Hag and I backed every other manager. I want him to succeed, but I covered Ruben Amorim for breaking the lines a couple of years ago. I mean, this guy is obviously very, very special. You're referencing in terms of if he was to leave, that his reputation would be in the gutter. I'd be absolutely dumbfounded if they were to part ways with him. This is something that they had to realize was going to occur, because it comes down to that old adage of square pegs and round holes. That's essentially what he's been given. It draws me back that when he was on the cusp of signing, I made a point in just emphasizing to everybody, Ruben Amorim was coming in with very, very similar promising portfolio as Erik Ten Hag was. Both of them were after winning silverware in their own domestic divisions, and both of them had win ratios that exceeded 70%, and they had massive continental reputations. The main thing I was asking people to do was just to remember this if and when things got difficult for Manchester United, because anybody who thought that he was just going to come in and wave a magic wand was absolutely deluded. But at the same time, I think he has so much belief in his system and his principles that if he is given time to implement that, we've seen the benefits of what can occur at Sporting. I know it's very easy to diminish his accomplishments, and you'll have individuals doing that because they'll say it's not the same caliber of opposition that he's facing in the Premier League week in, week out. And to a certain extent, that is true, because there's a lot of opposition, obviously, in Portugal that he can dominate the ball against, and it allows him to cultivate a much stronger squad in comparison to his domestic opposition. But he was also going up against some real top-tier domestic opponents in Benfica and in Porto, and he broke that monopoly that was there. This guy is really talented. He's got real pedigree, but he still has to be held accountable for certain decisions. So much focus inevitably fixated then on Marcus Rashford and his continuous omission from the squad that has obviously led to his departure to Aston Villa on loan. That in itself spells the end to a memorable relationship between the club and the player, with so many standout moments in what has now been an often maligned career. Despite so many positives, it looks like the latter part of his time at Old Trafford has become the focal point. Following months of speculation about a move to Barcelona or Paris, he's ended up in Birmingham. And so much of that has gone hand in hand with all of the news that's coming out about an inability to be able to adhere to the simple fundamental requirements of Amorim at Manchester United. And then people put 2 and 2 together and get 50 when they see photographs of him being released at Aston Villa. All in all, just focusing on the player and focusing on his move, I can appreciate that Villa are in a good place under Unai Emery. But what is your opinion on the entire Rashford scenario, from failing to generate a successful relationship with Amorim up to the move to Birmingham?
It's heartbreaking as a Manchester United fan to see. I remember Rashford broke through against Midtjylland. It was euphoric seeing a player that's come through the academy. Obviously, I know I'm not from Manchester, but you feel like he's one of your own as a United fan. You feel like that could be me. That could have been any one of us who broke through, went through the academy and got to live their dream. And his first couple of games, the goals against Arsenal, and then breaking into the team under Van Gaal was special. And I feel like it'll be a long time before we see anything like that again. Obviously, comparable is Cobby, but Rashford was different. To see the way it's gone is, again, I feel like if Rashford broke through 20 years ago, let's say Rashford broke through in 2005 and he got to play in them brilliant Fergie sides and he got to win league titles and he was part of squads like that and he had proper professionals in the dressing room around him, I feel like we're having so many different discussions about Marcus Rashford as a talent. But ultimately, Ruben Amorim made a point a couple of weeks ago that if you're on 350 grand a week, and I'm not saying money doesn't come into it for me, but just the point he made in general, money doesn't matter for me when I'm judging a footballer. People used to say the criticism towards Harry Maguire and the bomb threats to his house were acceptable because he's on a high amount of money. Nonsense, absolute nonsense. I say to these players are still human beings, and Marcus Rashford is one of the most targeted footballers on the planet in regards to the media criticism that go towards him. But Amorim did make a very good point. He said, if you're on 350 grand a week and there's 250 people and counting, including people like Alex Ferguson, including some of the legends like Dennis Irwin having their funds cut and everything like that, if them type of things are happening and people's livelihoods are being affected by the financial crisis that has been ongoing at the club, caused by the Glazers, absolutely. But if you're on 350 grand a week and his belief is that you're not putting everything into your training sessions, then things have to change, and you do have to be held accountable for that. And there's no reason for Amorim to come in and say that Rashford's not training well enough. There's absolutely no reason, because Rashford is arguably our best attacker. So there was no reason for Amorim to come in and target Marcus Rashford. I didn't feel like there was. And this is my favourite player. This is, you can go back through this is one of my favourite players ever in Manchester United history. I've jerseys with Rashford on the back. He's given me some of the happiest moments of my entire life, and that's football and life in general included. It's been Marcus Rashford. But if you're not putting that effort in training, you don't need. And I understand he obviously seems to have a lot going on in his kind of his day-to-day life, his personal life, which is why I felt leaving the country in general was the better move. I didn't feel like a move to Birmingham. Obviously, he's still going to be commuting from Manchester by the sounds of the reports. He's not actually. Gary Neville kept referencing the fishbowl that he's in Manchester, and I can absolutely believe that is a difficult thing for him to navigate, because he is Mr. Manchester. He's Mr. Manchester United, and everyone expects so much of him. And obviously, he's been targeted since the kind of what he done with the government a couple of years ago, the brilliant things he done, in spite of the government probably a couple of years ago. But has he left that fishbowl? Not really. He's still in that fishbowl. He's still being targeted by the English media. I just don't feel like the move to Villa was the right move. I felt like a move abroad, or like even a Galatasaray, even something like that, just outside of the grasp of the toxicity of the media, because he's still being targeted. Aston Villa fans are having the same kind of protective kind of feelings that we would have had up against Rashford for the past 10 years, and they've only had it for a week now, if even. So to summarise, it's so disappointing. It's 100% so much different, I feel, than when Kane left Spurs, because Kane was leaving Spurs for his own personal kind of goals. He knew he'd never win enough at Spurs. I don't feel like that's why Rashford's leaving United. I just feel like the club have let him down, and he's probably let us down as well along that way with some of his performances. I tried to stick up for him a lot last season. I still would, but yeah, as a United fan, it's one of the most, genuinely seeing him in the Villagers was one of the most heartbreaking kind of feelings as a fan. Probably even worse than when Ronaldo left, but just because he's one of our own, kind of, you know what I mean?
I understand totally. I think it's shared by the vast majority of the fan base. And Anthony was another departure, as you said, inevitably receiving player of the match, as we said, on his Betis debut in La Liga. Barring some sort of miraculous turn of events, it's difficult to see the Brazilian cultivating his desired stance in the Premier League. As much as it is disappointing to see Rashford leave, alongside the exodus of other individuals such as Anthony, such as Tyrell Malacia and Jadon Sancho previously, we have seen the arrival of a couple of players in Aidan Heaven and Patrick Dorgu, two highly talented youngsters to accommodate this new-look youthful defence that can facilitate the desires of Ruben Amorim. And that's what we need to focus on in moving forward. Just starting with Heaven, we see another Arsenal prodigy following Chido Obi Martin departing London for the Northwest. Admittedly, a central defensive pairing of William Saliba and Gabriel played a part in his decision to move, despite the best efforts of Mikel Arteta. But this is a massive capture for Manchester United, and I believe it alleviates much of the previous desires to capture the left-footed Jared Brantwaite from Everton. Were you pleased with the confirmation of his signing when it broke?
Yeah. You know, a lot of people are judging Aidan Heaven off the pre-season game where we played them, and Rasmus Højlund scored a very nice goal against them. And people are looking at that footage and saying, oh, he's why are we signing him, this, that, and the other. Throughout the academy, he was kind of, at his time at Arsenal, he played more in midfield, and there is a belief in the future that he could kind of transition into midfield for us. But he's been playing at left centre-back for the last while. I think he's only made one senior appearance for Arsenal, but you look at his physical profile, it's immense. It's everything you want from a left-foot centre-back. Him and Kukonki, Godwill Kukonki, having them two as options in that position, given the way the physicality and the way centre-backs are looked at these days and what they can bring to a football team. And the biggest thing is that left-footed centre-back. It's so rare. It's so rare in modern football, that left centre-back, that ability to be able to break lines with your left foot. They're so highly sought after. And to get a player at 18 years old at his quality is a big capture. That's why I'm probably among a lot of people who feel like it was a decent window. Obviously, I would have rathered, a striker come in, and I agree with the decision not to go for Matthias Tell, given what Spurs have paid. 10 million loan fee is absolutely scandalous. I can't believe they've done that for a player who might not even sign. United made the decision to say, we're not going to develop a player for another football team, and they were right to do so. Still, within that, there was players available that we could have went for. Players I know we are linked with, players I know we had discussions with. But the captures of Heaven, the captures of Dorgu it's a sign of a different kind of way we're going in terms of recruitment. Like in the past, that would have been what? Like, remember the loan deals we've done under the Glazers over the past couple of seasons, a Weghorst or a Sabitzer, them type of loan deals that are decent in the short term, but they make no sense in the long term. This shows a bit of more long-term planning by Ineos and Diego Leon as well. We can't forget Diego Leon. He's another impressive signing that we've made. But yeah, Heaven really impresses me, and he has a great name as well. He'll go down well in Old Trafford.
It makes for such easy headlines when you're writing articles, when he's doing fantastic, inevitably in the days to come. You see, this is a big thing that so many people look past, because modern football, it's so easy for conversations to break out on social media. And as you said, one appearance against Manchester United in a pre-season friendly in the US, that can spark an inevitable synopsis for his suitability to be able to adhere to this structure in this Manchester United side, where in reality, anybody who has spent time watching academy football for the last couple of years realises that this is a very, very special talent. And obviously, following this disastrous injury for Lisandro Martinez, that will probably not only see him ruled out for the rest of the season, but it will probably see him ruled out for the calendar year. his omission and his lack of availability for the first team is really going to accelerate Heaven coming in. That can only benefit him. It can benefit his confidence and give him an opportunity to come into a first team that is not setting the world alight with amazing performances. So that in itself can alleviate a little bit of the pressure that might be getting put on his shoulders at such a young age. And then on the other side of it, in Patrick Georgiou, we see a 20-year-old player with immense versatility arrived from Lecce in Serie A. He can play on the left, he can play on the right, he can play in attack and in defence. We've touched on the potential benefits of the Dane lining out at a left back. That position finally having an actual left-footed defender, particularly after news that Shaw has collected yet another injury setback today, and Tyrell Malacia has departed for PSV. When you consider the similarities that he has with Giovanni Quenda, who you've touched on before, this truly signifies the first arrival of a player who fits into Amorim's new look system. I recently sat and I spoke with some of the sporting ultras. I asked them about Amorim and how they would view the particular situation he's in right now. But I also paid reference to their opinion on Patrick Georgiou and would he be the type of footballer that they would have expected him to sign at Sporting. And each and every one of the individuals that I spoke to said this is the exact type of player that he would have gone for. He fits the mold and the characteristics with his attributes, his traits, his versatility. Are you looking forward to seeing him in action, potentially against Leicester on Friday evening?
Yeah, I heard about the interest for Georgiou in June, and I knew it was kind of clear and definitely something we were looking to do then. Obviously, I believe Nuno Mendes was the first target. Obviously, financially, it didn't make sense. And I also think he was using us for a new contract with PSG. The old kind of chestnut with Manchester United. But Georgiou is someone that a lot of clubs in Europe wanted. He is an absolute rocket. Technically brilliant, physically brilliant. And he adds such a new dynamic. And it'll be interesting to see whether he's deployed at right wing back. Because we know Amorim likes the wrong-footed wing backs. Done it with Quenda. The left wing back of Sporting as well was wrong-footed. It'll be very interesting to see if Georgiou is going to play as a wrong-footed right wing back, or whether he just plays as that left wing back and Dalot goes back to right wing back for the time being. But it is, as you say, it's the first proper Ruben Amorim signing, because I feel like Diego Leon, I feel like that was a scouting kind of signing. I don't feel like that was something. I feel like it was something that was put in place before Amorim would have come into the club, and maybe Aiden Heaven is similar, but this is someone that Amorim would have definitely been in the discussions for recruitment with, because he's, as you say, he is a Ruben Amorim player. Talk about the Scandinavian players he would have looked for in sport, and you have Gyökeres, you have Hjumland, so he obviously does have a kind of a knowledge of that Scandinavian kind of football. There's a player as well in Scandinavia that we're looking for at the minute of Michelin called Ousmane Diao. Could be something to look out for in the coming months as well. I believe he signed Ousmane Diomande, who played for Michelin as well. Again, Scandinavians. So these type of things, them type of recruitment decisions that Amorim has been doing at Sporting are carrying over to Manchester United, which is good, because when speaking to kind of people close to Sporting last year, people doubted Amorim's ability to kind of function without Hugo Viana. There was a huge kind of partnership between them two, and it was kind of like if one leaves, the other will struggle, and vice versa, which is interesting in regards to Viana going to Manchester City. What they also did say, though, is that Viana will struggle more without Amorim than Amorim would struggle without Viana. He's been placed as the boss of Sporting over there, and a lot of the recruitment decisions of Sporting were Amorim, which I will find that dynamic interesting under Ineos, because directly they wanted to take control of Ten Hag, and obviously Ten Hag's recruitment over the past 2 years, I will say he shouldn't have been left in charge of recruitment solely to himself, but his recruitment leaves a lot to be desired. So it'll be interesting to see how much of a say, considering what Amorim wanted at Sporting in terms of near total control. It'll be interesting to see how that dynamic works in the long term. But a signing like Georgiou raises the physical and technical floor of the team, which is something we lack so much. The pace. You look at this Manchester United team, and you look at any good Manchester United team that has played over the past, in my lifetime, it's had pace. We've no pace in the team at the minute. It seems like Garnacho's not as quick as he once was. Højlund, I can say, is the only player in the team that I look at that has pure pace. Ahmad's quick, but he's not Dan James quick, or he's not old Rashford quick, that type of quick. There's no real pace in the team at the minute, which is definitely something Dorgo's going to bring. He's automatically the quickest player in the team off the bat, which is brilliant. It's nice. But as I said, it shows a switch in the recruitment. It shows a switch in the type of players that we looked for under the Glazers. Look at the players we failed to sign under the Glazers that have come back to bite us. Just like you look at Moises Caicedo, your Enzo Fernandez, them type of players. I feel like Dorgu was a player in the mould that we're after getting into the club. So it's very nice. Ineos are taking a lot of criticism, but I feel like this window is nearly an impressive one on Slaver. I'll give it like a 6 out of 10. A striker would have made an 8 or 9 out of 10.
Obviously, I put a piece together yesterday that was analysing the finances and looking at everything from PSR to FFP and the difficulties that Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Ineos are facing in the market. It's a really, really informative part that so many people are either unaware of or choosing to ignore, or just not aware of it all. Even going off and giving what was initially reported as a 5 million loan fee from Adi Estelle, that in itself could have been problematic, as bizarre as that seems for Manchester United, that 5 million would cause an issue. But that brings us to Ruud van Nistelrooy's return to Old Trafford with his Leicester side on Friday evening for an FA Cup 4th round fixture that in all truth presents the opportunity for the possibility of progression in the Cup and potentially building momentum in the squad. With 4 straight wins in League and Cup against the Foxes, and that really does set the tone for a Friday night under the lights at Old Trafford ahead of some much needed time on the training field. Is this a must-win game, and can you see anything other occurring, Dylan?
I can absolutely see something different occurring. Nothing surprises me anymore, realistically, I know we beat Leicester twice this season under Ruud van Nistelrooy. He's going to be in the dugout for every single game we've played against Leicester this season by the looks of things. But I can definitely see the result going to Leicester. They have very talented players. They beat Spurs 2 weeks ago on the 26th of January. So it shows you they can beat one of the... I suppose are struggling this season, but so are we. So it shows you on any day. They've Bill El Canous, who's absolutely immense. I would love if United had a look at him in the future. But in regards to what the connotations this holds for the season, again, you mentioned your piece about PSR and the financial restraints Manchester United are facing at the minute. I don't think people realise how detrimental United not qualifying for Europe next season is going to be. Throughout this whole period post-Ferguson, if I'm not mistaken, we've never not qualified for Europe. This would be the first season we haven't qualified for Europe. And financially, people will see the repercussions of that. We're going to be largely handcuffed in regards to what we can do in the window, even more so than we would have been. Qualifying for Europe would have given us that leeway. And there's a backdoor way through winning the FA Cup. As we found out last season, we got through to the Europa League by winning the FA Cup and having that amazing day out against City. Again, days out again are something that fans need. And the one thing that made last season so bearable was the cup run. Ten Hag brought us to the FA Cup final. We won the FA Cup final. And by the end of the season, you're thinking, this wasn't that bad. We got that. One of the happiest days of my life as a United fan beating City in that final because nobody expected us to do it. And that gives the fans a boost. That gives the players a boost. And obviously, it didn't work for Ten Hag. The boost it gave the players or the boost it gave Ten Hag because he ended up getting sacked. But obviously, it's a different scenario and a different set of rules for Amorim only coming into the club. To start the season off and going for a bit of a cup run, going far in the cup. If he won us the FA Cup, it would be immense. It would be good for him in terms of recruitment. Again, it would give you a bit of connection between the fans and players, which is non-existent at the minute. When you spoke at the start about that Xerxes booing and everything like that, it hurts the players as much as it hurts the fans, that lack of connection. And that's something that Amorim redeployed in Portugal when he was there. He built up that connection between the fans and the players, and that's something that an FA Cup run or win would do. It'll be hard putting Van Nistelrooy to the sword. Truthfully, it'll be difficult beating a club legend. That's why I'm glad as well that Besiktas are gone out of the Europa League, because facing Ollie in the next round would have been difficult. But it's a huge game, as every game between now and the end of the season is going to be. If you were to put the question to me now, what would I rather win, the FA Cup or the Europa League? I think there's only one answer. But if you were to put the question to me, what's more realistic? I'd say our most realistic chance of a trophy this season is the FA Cup. And we need to go gung-ho on Friday. And I'm predicting 2-1 win. I think Leicester will take the lead, and then it'll come back into the game again. As you said, reactive instead of proactive. We'll have to react to win the game, and it won't be an easy game. It won't be smooth sailing, but I'm looking forward to it, and hopefully, sometimes when we need results, sometimes we pull them out of fire. Liverpool, Man City this season, the Arsenal result in the FA Cup. When we need results and when we need to do something to progress to the next stage, or when the backs are against the wall, sometimes they pull that out of fire. So I'm hopeful that's what's going to happen on Friday.
And on that, there is no more to say. 2-1, I'm sure every single listener will take. And you got ahead of me with that, because I was going to ask for the scoreline. We have individuals that tune in on a weekly basis, and I think they live and die by our score predictions here in the Theatre of Red, for one way or the other. It was an absolute fantastic chat with you this evening. Great to spend some time with you. What have you got coming up in your world over the coming weeks?
We have a podcast next week. I believe LA is going to go to battle another fan. He had a battle last week over Rashford. I think he's going to battle another fan next week. I'll probably be on that one. Couple of articles coming out in the next few days, and I'll probably have a bit of transfer news as well. I've been saying to people for the past couple of months to keep an eye on the Brazilian market in regards to Manchester United, and that'll be probably an article I have coming out soon, what type of players we're looking at in the Brazilian market. I could give you an exclusive now if you're looking for it, but look, if not, no worries.
No, by all means, if you've got an exclusive to share.
Yeah, so I had to keep it under wraps for a while, but United, there was a Fabrizio put out a tweet 2 years ago that United were interested in Lauren Lucas from Flamengo. I believe he's playing for Flamengo. And kind of recently I had discussions with people close to him, and there was active discussions ongoing with United in the summer, and he's available for 15 million add-ons. So I would not be surprised to see that as a deal that United go for. It's something United are looking to make the most of. Obviously, players like Endrick, Estevao in recent years, Vitor Roque, and United are looking to get on top of that. Brilliant scouts in the South American part of the world, which is seen by the son of Diego Leon, and hopefully one or two of those players come through our doors and through our ranks in the coming months. But one's to keep an eye out for sure.
This is something that I have lamented for years. A lot of people thought that United didn't have an adequate scouting department and an adequate scouting network, when in reality, there were scouts working around the clock, particularly in South America. And there is numerous household names today that were advised to Manchester United over the last 5-6 seasons, and the club just chose to ignore it. So the very fact that we're starting to look in this market and we're starting to see the value in bringing in South American footballers who have the ability to either go on and create an impact in the team, or can create a career for themselves elsewhere. And then you can look at the benefit of selling those players on, just as Manchester City have done in recent years. That's absolutely all any football fan wants to see. But Dylan, regarding that, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, how can they do so?
You can get in touch with me on Twitter at Dylan McBennett7. And then, obviously, if you wanted to get to it through email, it's dylanmcbennett@attackingfootball.com.
Easy as that, ladies and gentlemen. And this is a guy that is well worth following. As you can hear, salt of the earth, and he has genuine information coming out on a daily, weekly basis. As always, I'd like to thank you all for tuning in, and be sure to follow us on theatre_of_red on every single social platform, and visit the website for daily content ranging from everything from team news to transfers and exclusive content that we will receive through the club. Wherever you are listening, please subscribe. And if you want to leave us a review, it goes a long way, particularly on Spotify. You can leave a 5-star review if you're feeling very kind, and it takes about 2 to 3 seconds. And on the eve of what is the 67th anniversary of February 6, 1958, we do recognize what is a challenging time for many, remembered by millions of individuals worldwide following the death of 23 souls after the Munich air disaster. Flight 609, carrying Manchester United's Busby Babes, crashed on its third attempt to take off in Munich, with the team returning from a European Cup triumph against Red Star Belgrade. Among the dead were 8 first-team players, 3 members of staff, and 1 supporter. It remains as tragic today as it was 67 years ago. We loved you then, we love you now, and we will never forget.